The shockwave begins. The room was still. Cameras hummed in the background. The chatter of reporters dulled into silence as the air shifted. On one side of the stage, Eric Swalwell, the California Democrat known for his sharp tongue and courtroom-like precision, leaned forward, ready to strike. On the other stood Kash Patel, the man many saw as Donald Trump's most loyal defender, the gatekeeper of secrets, the strategist who knew where every skeleton was buried. This was not just another political spat. This was a collision course of two men with power, pride, and history on their shoulders. And what happened here, what was about to unfold, would ignite whispers in Washington, headlines across America, and shockwaves in households from New York to Nevada. Swalwell's eyes narrowed as he laid down the opening strike, a piercing question, laced with both accusation and certainty. Kash Patel shifted in his chair. The cameras caught the slight twitch of his jaw. His lips pressed together, as if sealing words he dared not let escape. But Swalwell wasn't asking politely. He was tearing down a wall brick by brick. And behind that wall, hidden in the shadows, Patel held something he desperately wanted buried. The clash wasn't just about two men. It was about loyalty versus truth. About power versus accountability. About what was owed to Trump, and what was owed to America. And as the opening salvo reverberated across the chamber, America leaned in. This was going to be bigger than anyone had imagined. To understand why this confrontation mattered so much, we have to step back. We have to see the storm brewing behind these two figures. Eric Swalwell had built his reputation on fiery confrontations, on calling out hypocrisy without hesitation. His detractors called him theatrical, too eager for headlines. But his supporters saw him as fearless, willing to hold power to account, no matter who sat in the hot seat. Kash Patel, on the other hand, was not a politician in the traditional sense. He was the man behind the curtain, a lawyer, a national security aide, someone who operated in the shadowy corners of power. When Trump needed loyalty, Patel delivered. When Trump needed defenders, Patel was at the front lines. He wasn't polished like a senator or soft-spoken like a judge. He was blunt, brash, and deeply loyal. The clash between them wasn't just two personalities. It was two worlds colliding, the world of institutional oversight and the world of personal loyalty to a leader. And that tension was about to explode under the bright lights of the cameras. Mr. Patel, Swalwell began, his voice carrying across the chamber like a prosecutor addressing a defendant. You had access to classified briefings. You were part of the inner circle. And yet, you withheld information. Information that Donald Trump himself should have known. Isn't that correct? The question hung in the air. Reporters scribbled furiously. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. Patel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a sip of water, buying time. But the pause was damning. In politics, silence often speaks louder than words. Swalwell pounced. You knew what you were doing. You shielded him. You made decisions not as a national security aide, but as a gatekeeper, choosing what Trump would and would not see. The words gatekeeper and shielded cut deep. They framed Patel not as a public servant, but as a manipulator, a man who had twisted the very flow of information to the most powerful office in the world. Patel finally leaned forward, his voice calm but laced with defiance. Congressman, with all due respect, I did my job. I protected national security. I followed protocol. If you're suggesting otherwise, then you're not just questioning me, you're questioning the integrity of the system itself. It was a clever reply, one designed to flip the accusation back onto Swalwell. But Swalwell wasn't buying it. You're wrong, Swalwell shot back, his voice rising. This isn't about protocol. This is about power. And you know it. The crowd of journalists exchanged glances. This wasn't just a hearing anymore, it was a showdown. And the stakes were only rising. For Patel, the danger was exposure. For Swalwell, the danger was overreach. But both men knew one thing: whoever controlled the narrative today would dominate tomorrow's headlines. The tension grew thick, like the calm before a storm. Cameras zoomed in. The nation held its breath. What Kash Patel was hiding, and what Swalwell was determined to reveal, would change everything. And this was only the beginning. The clash of personalities took center stage, but the subtext was far deeper. Patel wasn't just accused of withholding information from Trump. He was accused of shaping Trump's very worldview by controlling what entered the Oval Office. If true, Patel wasn't merely a loyal aide, he was a shadow president, a man who had the power to bend reality for the most powerful leader on Earth. And Swalwell knew that if he could prove this, even hint at it, the story would explode far beyond the walls of the hearing. The press would devour it. Critics would weaponize it. Trump's defenders would scramble to deny it. But if Patel could withstand the onslaught, if he could hold the line, he would walk away not just intact, but emboldened. This was more than a battle of words. This was survival. Did Donald Trump know the full scope of the intelligence briefings you filtered? Swalwell pressed, leaning closer. Patel smiled faintly, almost mocking. Congressman, intelligence is complicated. Not everything is relevant. Not everything is necessary for the president's daily attention. We made decisions, yes, but always in the interest of efficiency and focus. Swalwell's eyes burned. Efficiency and focus? Or manipulation and control? Because what I see, Mr. Patel, is a man who decided for himself what the commander-in-chief should or shouldn't know. And that's not loyalty. That's betrayal. Gasps rippled through the audience. The word betrayal carried weight. Heavy weight. Patel's smirk faded. His fingers tapped the table. For the first time, the mask of calm cracked. And that was when the room realized Swalwell had landed the first real blow. The opening act of this drama was complete. The hook was set. Kash Patel had been accused of betrayal, not just of Trump, but of the very office he served. Eric Swalwell had framed him as the villain, the manipulator, the man who thought he was smarter than the president himself. And Patel, though quick with words, had shown cracks. But what happened next, what Patel would reveal, what Swalwell would dig up, wasn't just about two men. It was about power, secrets, and a question that could shake America's trust in its leaders. Who really runs the White House, the president, or the gatekeepers who decide what he sees? The battle lines had been drawn. The cameras rolled on. And the storm was only beginning. Because what Kash Patel had hidden was about to be dragged into the light. The conflict ignites. The air in the chamber thickened. What began as a pointed exchange had transformed into a battlefield of words, power, and perception. Kash Patel, the loyalist who stood in the shadows of Donald Trump's presidency, now found himself forced into the spotlight. And across from him, Eric Swalwell sharpened his arguments like a blade, ready to cut deeper with every sentence. This wasn't simply political theater. It was a test of survival. And the question loomed, could Patel keep his composure as Swalwell turned up the heat? Swalwell's voice cut through the stillness like a hammer striking steel. You claim efficiency. You claim focus. But isn't it true, Mr. Patel, that you deliberately concealed intelligence that painted Donald Trump in a negative light? The chamber buzzed. It was the kind of question that didn't just demand an answer, it demanded a reckoning. Patel leaned back, exhaled slowly, and folded his arms. His tone was deliberate, measured, calculated. Congressman, with all due respect, your accusation assumes a false premise. My role was not to embarrass the president. My role was to protect national security. To filter out noise. You can twist it however you like, but you weren't in the room. You weren't the one making those calls. It was a deflection, but one delivered with icy confidence. Yet even in his calmness, the edges of unease flickered in his eyes. Swalwell seized on it immediately. Not in the room? That's exactly the problem. No one was in the room but you. No checks, no balance, no oversight. You built a wall around Donald Trump and became the sole architect of what he believed. Gasps rippled again. The cameras zoomed in on Patel's face, capturing the tightening of his jaw. His silence stretched just long enough for the tension to spike. And then, Patel's lips curled into a sharp grin. "Congressman Swalwell," he said coldly, "if you're suggesting I manipulated the President of the United States, then you're suggesting the President himself was weak enough to be manipulated. Is that really the case you want to make? That your Commander-in-Chief was a puppet? Because if that's your argument, then you're not questioning me, you're insulting the very office of the presidency." The words detonated like a grenade. The crowd erupted in murmurs. It was a calculated strike, flipping the narrative back onto Swalwell, forcing him to choose either double down and risk appearing as though he was calling Trump weak, or retreat and lose ground. Swalwell didn't flinch. He leaned forward, eyes blazing. "If the truth makes the president look weak, that's not on me. That's on you, Mr. Patel, for keeping it from him." The line hung like a thunderclap. And in that instant, Swalwell regained the upper hand. The clash was no longer polite. It was war. For Patel, every word was a shield. For Swalwell, every accusation was a spear. And as the exchange grew sharper, the stakes grew higher. Behind the cameras, staffers whispered. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. Social media exploded with real-time reactions. Hashtags trended. Clips were already being cut, uploaded, dissected by millions. America wasn't just watching this drama unfold, they were participating in it. And the question burned hotter than ever: what exactly had Patel hidden? Swalwell shifted gears. He wasn't just interested in cornering Patel, he wanted to expose him. Piece by piece, brick by brick. "Let's talk specifics," Swalwell declared. There were intelligence reports about foreign threats, threats that directly affected our elections, threats that spoke to interference. And yet, you filtered what the president saw. You downplayed what didn't suit the narrative. Isn't that correct? Patel's jaw tensed. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. And Swalwell pounced. "You weren't protecting national security. You were protecting Donald Trump. And in doing so, you endangered the country. That's not loyalty, Mr. Patel. That's sabotage." The word sabotage cut through the air like a blade. Reporters gasped. Some shook their heads, others nodded furiously. The chamber buzzed with the electricity of accusation. Patel's eyes narrowed, his voice colder than before. "I will not sit here and be accused of treason by a man who has never been in the trenches, never made the calls, never carried the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. You sit in judgment because it makes good television. But I know the truth. And the truth is this: without me, national security would have been chaos. Without me, the intelligence would have been noise. You call it sabotage. I call it leadership." The clash had escalated beyond words. Now, it was about framing history itself. To Swalwell, Patel was a villain, someone who hijacked the flow of intelligence to protect Trump at the expense of the nation. To Patel, he was a hero, someone who streamlined chaos into order, who took on the burdens so others didn't have to. Hero versus villain. Villain versus hero. And America was left to decide which lens to believe. But as the battle raged on, a deeper question loomed. What exactly had Patel kept hidden from Donald Trump? What report, what detail, what secret was so damning that it could shake the foundations of power if revealed? Swalwell was determined to drag it into the light. Patel was equally determined to keep it buried. And in that collision, the drama only grew more explosive. Swalwell leaned forward again, his voice cutting through the chamber like a knife. "You hid more than intelligence, Mr. Patel. You hid accountability. You shielded Donald Trump from the consequences of his own decisions. And in doing so, you didn't just manipulate him, you manipulated America. Patel's glare hardened. His silence spoke volumes. But Swalwell wasn't finished. And here's the part you can't escape: we have the receipts. Documents, testimonies, witnesses, all pointing to the same conclusion. You didn't serve the country. You served one man. And in serving one man, you betrayed 330 million Americans. The words struck like thunder. The audience gasped. The press scribbled furiously. For a moment, Patel looked rattled. His hand twitched against the desk. His composure, once impenetrable, now showed visible cracks. And then, he leaned in, his voice icy, deliberate, unflinching. Congressman Swalwell, if you had the receipts, you wouldn't need to grandstand. You'd present them. But you don't. What you have are theories, conjecture, and ambition. You don't want the truth. You want a headline. And today, you're not going to get it. The exchange was brutal, raw, and cinematic. Two men locked in a battle for dominance, not just in that chamber, but in the hearts and minds of every American watching. Act 2 burned with fire. The conflict had ignited, the accusations sharpened, and the stakes soared higher. Swalwell painted Patel as the betrayer of truth, the manipulator of power, the man who decided what Trump could and could not know. Patel framed himself as the loyalist, the protector, the one who carried the burden so others could pretend their hands were clean. The hero. The villain. The villain. The hero. The lines blurred as each man threw fire at the other, forcing America to choose who to believe. But as fierce as this act had been, it was only the prelude. Because the real explosion, the escalation, was still to come. And when it came, it would shake the chamber to its core. The escalation. The walls of the chamber seemed to close in as the clash reached new heights. What had started as accusation and denial now spiraled into something much larger, an existential confrontation about loyalty, truth, and the very soul of American democracy. Eric Swalwell leaned in like a prosecutor circling his prey. Kash Patel, defiant, sat like a fortress under siege. And America held its breath. The escalation began with a single document. A folder, plain and unmarked, but thick enough to promise revelations. Swalwell lifted it deliberately, every movement calculated for maximum effect. "Mr. Patel," he said, his voice sharp as glass, "this folder contains testimony, communications, and classified reports, each pointing to one conclusion. You didn't merely filter intelligence. You buried it. You hid details about foreign actors, financial dealings, and yes, direct warnings that could have changed policy decisions at the highest level." Why? The chamber erupted in murmurs. Cameras zoomed. Journalists leaned forward like predators sensing blood. Patel's lips pressed into a tight line. His fingers drummed once against the desk before stilling. His voice came low, deliberate, but edged with fire. "Congressman, if you had anything of substance, you wouldn't wave folders like props in a cheap play. You'd present evidence. You'd lay it out plainly. But you won't, because you can't. Because you don't have the truth. What you have is theater." The insult landed with force, but Swalwell's smirk only widened. "Oh, we'll get to the evidence," he shot back. "And when we do, America will see exactly what kind of man you are." The words dripped with venom. The escalation had officially begun. What followed was no longer an exchange of words, but a battle of ideologies. Swalwell represented transparency, accountability, and a fierce belief that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, must shine in the light. Patel represented loyalty, secrecy, and the belief that shielding the president from chaos was a form of strength, not betrayal. Both men believed themselves the hero. Both painted the other as the villain. And the country split down the middle, each camp cheering their chosen champion. On Twitter, clips went viral. TikTok flooded with dramatic edits of their exchange. Cable news ran live split screens of the confrontation. And across kitchen tables, workplaces, and classrooms, the question burned, who is right? Swalwell pressed harder. His tone sharpened, every syllable slicing like a blade. You weren't protecting the country, Mr. Patel. You were protecting Donald Trump's ego. You knew that certain intelligence, about election interference, about financial vulnerabilities, about foreign influence, would enrage him, destabilize him. So you kept it from him. You decided what the President of the United States was allowed to know. You became the gatekeeper of democracy. And no one elected you to do it. The audience gasped. Patel didn't blink. He leaned forward, voice icy calm. You call it gatekeeping. I call it leadership. And if you think Donald Trump couldn't handle intelligence, then you're saying your president was incompetent. I refuse to believe that. But maybe you don't. The line landed with devastating precision. Once again, Patel flipped the accusation on its head, daring Swalwell to frame Trump as weak. Swalwell's face hardened. His reply came sharp, quick, relentless. Competence isn't the issue. Integrity is. And the truth is this, you weren't honest with your boss, and you weren't honest with the American people. You thought you knew better. That makes you dangerous, Mr. Patel. That makes you unfit to serve. The escalation wasn't just in words, it was in energy. The chamber pulsed with raw electricity, every sentence a spark threatening to ignite an inferno. The audience leaned forward, caught in the gravity of the clash. The press scribbled like mad, their pens racing to capture history in real time. And then, Swalwell dropped the hammer. Let's talk about October 2020, he declared. There was an intelligence report detailing threats from multiple foreign adversaries, reports that directly contradicted Donald Trump's public statements. Reports that could have changed the election conversation. But that report never reached him. You buried it. Why, Mr. Patel? Why did you hide that from the President of the United States? The chamber froze. Even Patel's mask cracked. His eyes flickered, his jaw clenched. For the first time, silence pressed against him like a weight. And in that silence, Swalwell pressed again. Was it because you were afraid of how he'd react? Or was it because you were afraid of what the American people would think if the truth came out? Patel's reply came slow, deliberate, almost whispered at first, but with a steel edge beneath. You have no idea the chaos that report would have unleashed. You talk about transparency. You talk about accountability. But what you don't talk about is responsibility. I carried that responsibility, Congressman. I bore the burden so the country didn't fracture even further. Sometimes leadership isn't about telling everyone everything. Sometimes leadership is about knowing what not to say. The audience gasped again, but this time in shock. Patel had all but admitted to withholding critical intelligence. And Swalwell, sensing victory, pounced. So you admit it, you buried the truth. You decided that Americans couldn't handle reality. You became the arbiter of what this nation deserved to know. That's not leadership. That's tyranny in disguise. The chamber exploded in noise. Some shouted in outrage. Others clapped in support. The clash had reached a fever pitch. Swalwell's accusations now rang with undeniable clarity. Patel's defenses, though calm and cold, revealed more than he intended. And America watched, riveted, as two men carved opposing visions of power, truth, and democracy. The escalation wasn't just about what Patel hid. It was about who controlled the narrative, who decided what truths saw the light of day. And with every passing second, the stakes grew higher. Because behind the fury of words lay one question that no one dared to ask aloud. If Kash Patel had hidden intelligence from Donald Trump, What else had he hidden from the American people? The conflict had escalated beyond personalities. Now, it was about the very nature of truth itself. Was Patel a protector or a saboteur? Was Swalwell a truth-teller or a grandstander? America was divided. Social media fractured. News outlets picked sides. And yet, beneath the spectacle, one truth remained: the real turning point had not yet arrived. Because the deeper secrets, the ones Patel feared most, still waited in the shadows. And when they surfaced, they wouldn't just escalate the conflict. They would change everything. The turning point. The storm had escalated beyond mere politics. Beyond debate. Beyond ideology. Now, it had become personal. Eric Swalwell had cornered Kash Patel with documents, with accusations, with relentless pressure. Kash had countered with icy defiance, with loyalty to Donald Trump, with appeals to responsibility over transparency. But the chamber knew, this could not continue forever. One of them had to break. One of them had to bend. One of them would emerge as the face of truth, and the other as the face of betrayal. And the turning point was about to strike. The moment came quietly at first. No raised voices. No grand theatrics. Just a single sheet of paper. Swalwell pulled it from the folder and held it high. The cameras zoomed, the flashbulbs ignited, and the audience craned their necks. This, he declared, is an internal memo. Dated October 28, 2020. Authored by you, Mr. Patel. In this memo, you specifically directed staff to suppress a foreign threat assessment because, and I quote, "the president does not need this distraction so close to the election." Gasps. Cries. Audible outrage. The words hung heavy in the chamber like smoke choking the air. Patel's face went pale, though his jaw tightened. "That memo is taken out of context," he fired back. Swalwell's reply was a hammer blow. "Out of context? You wrote it. You signed it. And tonight, America will see it. Because this memo isn't classified anymore. It's public record." The room exploded. Reporters scrambled. Phones lit up with breaking alerts. Twitter erupted with hashtags. The memo raced across the nation in seconds, screenshots flying faster than fact-checkers could blink. For the first time, the power balance shifted. Swalwell was no longer on defense. He had the smoking gun. And Patel knew it. The audience could see it in his eyes, the flicker of calculation, the weight of exposure. His fortress had cracked. But Kash Patel wasn't a man who surrendered easily. His voice cut through the noise, calm but sharp, like a blade slicing through fog. "You don't understand the stakes," he said, almost whispering, but his words carried. If that report had gone to the president, if it had leaked to the press, the election would have descended into chaos. Riots. Violence. Blood on the streets. I did what I had to do to keep America from burning. For a moment, the room fell silent. His justification hung there, heavy, haunting, almost convincing. Was it possible? Could Patel truly have been shielding the nation, not betraying it? But Swalwell, relentless, seized the silence. "Mr. Patel, America didn't elect you to decide what they could or couldn't handle. That's not patriotism. That's arrogance. You didn't protect this country. You played God with democracy. And for that, history will judge you." The blow landed like a cannon shot. The turning point was here. The narrative shifted in real time. On one side, Patel's defenders claimed he was a guardian, sacrificing transparency for stability. On the other, his critics declared him a usurper, a manipulator who denied both Trump and the people their right to the truth. Cable networks split their screens. Hashtags trended side by side, hashtag Patel the Protector versus hashtag Patel the Deceiver. But beneath the noise, one fact remained unshakable: the memo was real. And no matter how Patel spun it, America had seen the words in black and white. The pressure mounted. Patel's voice grew louder, his calm cracking into desperation. "You sit here on your high horse, Congressman, pretending you care about democracy. But you don't. You care about headlines. You care about grandstanding. Do you think one report, dumped on the president's desk a week before the election, would have saved democracy? No! It would have torn this nation apart." His fist slammed against the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "But I kept it together. I protected this country when no one else would." His eyes burned, his voice thundered. For the first time, Kash Patel was not calm. He was not cold. He was raw fire. Swalwell let him rage. Let the fire burn. Let America see. And then, with perfect timing, he leaned in, quiet, controlled, surgical. "You protected one man. Donald J. Trump. Not America. And now, the whole world knows it." The contrast was devastating. Patel's fury versus Swalwell's composure. The villain raging against the ropes, the hero standing calm in the storm. The chamber saw it. The cameras saw it. America saw it. And in that moment, the tide turned. But the true turning point wasn't Patel's outburst. It wasn't Swalwell's calm rebuttal. It wasn't even the memo. It was what came next. A whistleblower. Unannounced. Unexpected. A staffer from Patel's own office, stepping forward from the shadows with trembling hands and a sealed envelope. "I can't stay silent anymore," the staffer declared, voice shaking but strong. "There's more. Much more." The chamber erupted in chaos. Inside the envelope, emails. Dozens of them. Correspondence between Patel and senior officials, outlining deliberate efforts to filter intelligence, not just from Trump, but from Congress itself. The emails painted a chilling picture: a shadow network of decisions, information withheld, truths buried, not to protect the country, but to protect one man's political survival. As the first email was read aloud, gasps rippled through the chamber. Patel's face drained of color. His defenses collapsed. His fortress crumbled. And for the first time, silence. Kash Patel had no words. That silence was the turning point. The chamber knew it. The cameras knew it. America knew it. Swalwell had exposed what was hidden. Patel's icy confidence had shattered. The balance of power had shifted, perhaps forever. The clash was no longer about accusation and defense. It was about revelation. About accountability. About the price of secrecy. And the fallout would be unlike anything America had ever seen. Because if Patel had hidden truths this damning from Trump himself, what else was still buried in the shadows? The aftermath. The chamber was no longer the same. The memo had cracked the surface. The whistleblower's envelope had detonated the foundations. And now, Kash Patel stood in the center of a storm, exposed in ways no calculation, no icy calm, no loyalty could shield him from. This was no longer a duel between Eric Swalwell and Kash Patel. This was a trial before the American people. The verdict would not be spoken by judges or politicians. It would be shouted by the voices of millions, echoed across social media, carved into headlines, etched into history. And the aftermath had begun. Within hours, the nation split. Cable networks ran endless loops of Patel's outburst, his fist pounding, his words trembling with anger. Others replayed Swalwell's quiet, devastating composure. Memes flooded Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. Side-by-side clips of Patel's rage and Swalwell's calm went viral under captions like, "One protects democracy. The other protects himself." Late-night hosts cracked jokes. Activists lit up comment sections. Even international outlets ran the story, framing it as America's latest battle for its soul. The fallout was global. In Washington, the ripple effects struck hard. Committees scrambled. Hearings were scheduled. Subpoenas drafted. Staffers whispered in hallways, eyes darting, loyalty uncertain. Trump himself, though absent, loomed over every conversation. Was he betrayed? Protected? Or complicit? Patel, once the untouchable loyalist, now stood branded with a scarlet letter, the man who hid truths too damning for even Trump to know. And Swalwell, once mocked by critics, now celebrated by allies, rose overnight from congressman to crusader. His face plastered on magazine covers, his words replayed as soundbites of justice. Hero versus villain. Light versus shadow. The framing was complete. But the aftermath wasn't only political. It was personal. Patel found himself besieged, not only by critics, but by former allies. Invitations vanished. Doors closed. Calls went unanswered. His name became toxic, a synonym for deceit. Supporters online rallied with hashtags like #StandWithPatel, but even among them, doubts grew. Was he really protecting America, or only protecting power? Swalwell, too, carried burdens. Accusations of opportunism surfaced. Some called him a grandstander, a man chasing headlines rather than justice. For every cheer, there was a jeer. For every supporter, a detractor. The aftermath was messy, brutal, relentless. And it had only just begun. America now stood at a crossroads. Would Patel's exposure be the beginning of reform, an unmasking of secrecy and manipulation? Or would it fade into the endless cycle of outrage, swallowed by tomorrow's headlines? Would Swalwell's rise endure, transforming him into a lasting figure of resistance? Or would he, too, be consumed by the machine, discarded once his usefulness expired? The questions hung heavy. The answers uncertain. But one truth had been carved into history: the clash between Eric Swalwell and Kash Patel had left scars that could not be erased. Scars on reputations. Scars on trust. Scars on democracy itself. And in the quiet aftermath, as the cameras dimmed and the noise settled, America found itself staring at a mirror. A mirror reflecting not just Patel or Swalwell, not just Trump or Congress, but itself. A nation divided, suspicious, yearning for truth but terrified of what truth might cost. The fallout was not confined to one chamber, one debate, one clash. It spread into living rooms, workplaces, classrooms, dinner tables. Every American, knowingly or not, became part of the aftermath. Every American carried a piece of the scar. Yet, even in the wreckage, a strange sense of hope flickered. For all the shouting, all the chaos, all the betrayal, truth had still found a way to surface. A whistleblower's courage. A congressman's persistence. A nation's hunger to know. Perhaps that was the lesson of the aftermath. That secrets can be buried, but not forever. That shadows can grow, but light will eventually break through. That even in a time of division, the yearning for truth remains unkillable. And that yearning may yet be America's salvation. As Kash Patel walked out of the chamber that night, cameras flashing, reporters shouting, his once proud shoulders sagged. As Eric Swalwell followed, his face set in grim determination, the air was heavy not with victory, but with responsibility. Neither man knew what would come next. But both knew this: history had already chosen. And the aftermath would echo for years to come. This was not the end. It was only the beginning of a reckoning. A reckoning that would test leaders. A reckoning that would challenge truth. A reckoning that would define America's future. The clash of Swalwell and Patel had ignited something larger than either of them. And in that aftermath, the fire would keep burning. Forever. And so, As the lights dim on one of the fiercest clashes in recent memory, we are left with a question larger than any headline, larger than any rivalry, larger than any political theater. What happens when the secrets we bury come clawing back into the light? For Eric Swalwell and Kash Patel, the answer has already been written. One man ascends as the embodiment of persistence, unshaken, relentless in pursuit of the truth. The other walks away, scarred by exposure, his loyalty recast as concealment, his silence transformed into suspicion. But beyond their fates lies the deeper story, the reflection of us all. America today is no stranger to division. We are no strangers to leaders who clash, to figures who embody opposite poles of belief, character, and vision. Yet what this moment revealed is timeless, that dignity still carries weight, that arrogance still collapses under the weight of exposure, that truth, even delayed, still holds the power to shock a nation into silence. The fallout may fade. The names may shift. But the lesson endures. When leaders hide truths, when power bends reality, when loyalty outweighs integrity, the reckoning will come. And when it does, it will not whisper. It will roar. Think of the millions who watched. The students, the workers, the families at their dinner tables. Think of the countless voices on social media, typing furiously, sharing clips, amplifying the clash. Each reaction, each post, each meme became part of the story. This was not merely the tale of Swalwell versus Patel. It was the tale of America holding up a mirror to itself. A mirror that asks, do we want truth even when it stings? Do we want justice even when it divides? Do we want leaders who serve themselves, or leaders who serve us? The questions echo long after the cameras cut. And so, history closes the chapter with a lingering note: the duel may be finished, but the consequences are not. Tomorrow will bring new scandals, new rivalries, new battles. But the shadow of this moment will stretch across them all. Because the truth revealed here, however partial, however messy, proves something vital. That courage can pierce deception. That calm can silence fury. That integrity, though mocked, can outlast arrogance. And that, in the end, America still listens when the truth is spoken. As the chamber empties, as the echoes of shouting fade into silence, the story remains alive, not in marble halls, but in the hearts of millions who witnessed it. Perhaps that is where change begins. Not in grand speeches. Not in perfect heroes. But in the collective realization that truth matters, and when spoken with courage, it can shake even the mightiest foundations. This is not just a story of what was exposed. It is a story of what cannot be hidden. And with that, we close this chapter. But the reckoning has only just begun.